Hey, welcome back to this edition of So Sports. I'm Daniel Esteve. The late 80s were a downtime for the Dallas Cowboys. You had Tom Landry's iconic run coming to an end, and Jimmy Johnson's era still finding its footing. It was also just a different time for players. Players didn't have $40 million contracts to fall back on after their careers. Most of the time, they weren't even thinking about life after football. Former offensive lineman Crawford Ker navigated those waters and found success. Now he's sharing his story on this week's So Sports Sit Down. We've got a very special guest in studio today. Former Dallas Cowboy Crawford Ker's life in football was very much just a chapter. Now he's got a full memoir to share the rest of the story, titled A One-Way Ticket, the Crawford Ker Story, Life in the NFL and Business. And Crawford, when we talk about a full life, yes, football is a part of it, but it's just a very short part of it because you've got so much more to share, and I imagine you get into all those details in this book.
Well, I appreciate you having me on today, Daniel. Yeah, I mean, football was a starting point. It was a vehicle to do business. So I was in the league 8 years, and then 20 years in the restaurant business, then a little 5 years in the hotel business, and now I'm on your show. So it's been great to have me here.
So when you think about just the full circle moment, obviously it starts, I'm sure, with that time in the NFL, and so many fans here in the Dallas area, of course, going to be aware of your time with the Dallas Cowboys. And I imagine when it comes to business, flexibility is key. And you've got a huge taste of that in your time with the Dallas Cowboys alone, going from a Tom Landry to a Jimmy Johnson. You talk about having to find the balance of that transition. Did that help you in the future?
Yeah, well, I had some of the best mentors out there. My main guy was my father. So I just saw his hard work and all that. Then we had Tom Landry, and I had Jimmy Johnson for a while. Then I had Dan Reeves. So, I watched these guys work and their organizational skills. So I learned a lot from being in the NFL, and Dallas was a great place to play. Unfortunately, it was kind of a rough time. They were kind of sliding at the end of, Tom's segment, and then Jimmy came in, and that was kind of like turnover city. So that was a hard 2 years there.
Yeah, certainly, but plenty of lessons to be learned in that moment. I think a big thing for people to grasp when it comes to what the NFL was and what the NFL is, even life after the NFL is more often discussed now. That wasn't the case in the 80s for you.
Right. Well, I mean, life after the NFL is very scary. So you come out and you're kind of like a mini star, and then you come out and you got to start all over. So if you don't have a really good family business or something, it's very tough to kind of reinvent and do it. And I was lucky enough to get into the restaurant segment and grow that, but it was a lot of work. So it was as much work as the football was.
And of course, people are going to see your success. And you mentioned that you wrote this book for your kids.
Right.
And honestly, giving them a glimpse into what you have gone through. I think that down period before you find your footing in the quote unquote real world, that's such an important message for so many people to hear. What was that time trying to figure things out before you made your success in business?
Well, it's very scary when you leave football. My top salary was about $650,000, almost $700,000. So I come back into hometown and I'm seeing everyone work for 30 or 40. And, you're like, what do you want to do now? So I called a friend of mine. I said, how about like being a PR guy for like treadmills or athletic stuff? Because I always like to work out. And he goes, you don't want to do that. You have to travel and it pays $50,000. So, it was a lot of people telling you what not to do, but no one would tell you what to do.
Yeah, being on the offensive line, you got to be reactionary, right? You got to be able to take in information, but then still react. And I'm sure there are so many lessons you've learned. You mentioned 3 mentors already: your father, Jimmy Johnson, Tom Landry. Those are some fantastic mentors. Is there one lesson that you can pull in particular that maybe you have carried throughout your entire career that stands above the rest?
Well, I think, my dad had a lot of wisdom and common sense, so I listened a lot to him. And he was a big component of doing business out of football. He knew my personality wasn't great to probably work for somebody. So, you have to be an entrepreneur. You have to own your own business. From Tom, it was like loyalty and stability. He believed in a veteran team, and he was very loyal to his players, and, a really great guy. Jimmy was more like, what have you done for me lately? You can't practice, you're not playing. He was kind of a rough Jack Welch CEO, I would say. And then Dan Reeves was kind of a mixture of both of them.
Interesting. So many lessons to pull, I'm sure, that you've applied into very successful businesses that you've had since. But I'm curious, you kind of being on the outside now, looking at the NFL, obviously it's changed. You talk about your $650 salary. Guys are making $40 million now. I know the world's changed, but how have you seen almost the perspective of business during a playing career shift in just the last 20 years? How are players seeing life outside of football? And maybe you can look at an Andrew Luck retiring early, or even one of the newest Hall of Famers, Luke Kuechly, deciding to retire early and start to think about life beyond football a little earlier.
Well, I was thinking about that the other day, and you know, if you list the greatest offensive lineman, not so much football, but who has made a lot out of football, you have to go down to the Kelsey brothers or someone like that recently. But you got to kind of be outrageous. You got to put yourself out there. You got to take your shirt off in the Super Bowl, and you got to wear a bikini to do some kind of crazy thing. So, you know, the world's all about marketing now.
Yeah, with social media, players are understanding, wait a second, I've got this entire platform to myself. I can build that up during my career and set myself up for life outside of football.
Everyone's working on their own brand, where that a long time ago was about the Cowboy brand. You were a player in that brand. Now everyone becomes their own brand, and they're using that platform of followers and all that kind of stuff to their advantage. And you know, I don't do social media, I don't do Twitter, I don't have an Instagram. You know, I'm kind of old school when it comes to that, but I'm on your program, so that's enough benefit for me.
You, of course, talk about your career in the NFL, the incredible work you've done after it, and the challenges I'm sure that you faced throughout. Is there something maybe that isn't in this book that is to come that maybe you can share with us?
You know, a lot of people tell me that, you know, what are you doing next? What are you doing next? And maybe I'd work with you in the TV segment now.
Hey,
from now on.
I'll take it.
So we'll do that. But I don't know. It depends on what life kind of throws your way. And, you know, I'm always about looking at opportunities and seeing what happens. Me and my dad talked about it years ago. You know, why don't you write a book about some of the stuff? So I kind of put it out there. I put the good, but I put the bad in there. So it's been a lot of struggles, too. And business isn't easy. A lot of times you get the goal lining, but you don't get the whole story. In that book, I kind of try to do the whole story.
It sounds like the unsung heroes that are offensive linemen in
offensive
the NFL.
Lineman, the second smartest guy on the field, besides the quarterback.
Besides the quarterback.
Quarterback's got to be dialed in.
Perhaps that's up for debate as well, but no debate that this is something you guys should definitely pick up. Once again, it's One-Way Ticket, the One-Way Ticket, the Crawford Ker story, life in the NFL and in business. The book is available nationwide through Amazon and Barnes & Noble. There's still plenty more story to be told beyond this book. Perhaps Crawford Ker, the newest member of CW33. But regardless, Crawford, we appreciate the time.
I appreciate you, man. I love your show. You do a great job. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.